What can I say? I love pulseras. Call it the Mexican material girl in me, but I just love wearing something cute that reminds me of Mexico. And my boy Berto does a really good job of making stuff that you can wear if you're still in the broom closet, or if you're like me and you want to let your inner bruja roar. And if that's not what you're looking for, if you're looking for someone to do tarot readings, well, Berto does those too. And let me tell you, he's really accurate. Every time that I have lost something, I message him, and within 2 minutes after his reading, I find it. He's gifted. So please check out Las Flores de Guadalupe, Berto's shop. See what magic he can whip up for you. Hola, bienvenidos, and welcome to another episode of Tu Tia Bruja. I'm Bex Carlos, your host. We recently gained a lot of listeners in Finland and Australia. So if this is your first time listening, thanks for joining. And if you have been a tried and true listener of the podcast, thank you for returning. This is a solo episode. I'm just catching up on life. I wanted to kind of let you know what's going on with me. It does not cease to baffle me that people all over the world want to talk about how to be a radical bruja or witch and how to, one, see their fellow practitioners of color and to just learn. And I know that I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert, love to learn and educate myself, and I'm constantly growing, but I am wrong sometimes. And I think that it's important to remember that nobody gets to being the magical person that they want to be overnight, right? Like, even myself, I've only really been learning and studying and just trying to absorb as much material as I can since circa like 2018. That's like 5 years. There are people who know so much more than I do. There's so much information and there's so much knowledge that we just gloss over sometimes. And academia is important, yes. Is academia typically a way of white intellectuals needing to need a source to know that something's true? Sure, sometimes it is. But I also think that it's important for us practitioners of marginalized groups, practitioners of color, all these different types, we deserve to say our piece and we deserve to educate each other. There is no one way to be a magic practitioner. Right now, with this Virgo full moon we just had, the topic of being grounded and seeing the world through the eyes of who you are now at a different time. What I mean by that is, right, is sometimes you go in having the best intentions of something and it just falls flat. Like one episode that I would love to address, I really did a disservice, I think, in the episode about chakras, because chakras come from Hinduism, even though chakras are a way of naming different energy spots in our body. And I know that growing up, I didn't have a word for a lot of that. My mom would be like, te voy a enseñar cómo hacer ventosas, and I'm going to show you how to do all these things, right? Like she did things that I don't think she considered to be finger quote witchcraft or like any type of practice that really was anything other than a potential way to alleviate pain. We think about our physical health. Even now, most people are thinking about their mental health to an extent. I think we're all still learning. But like, do we talk about our spiritual health? And I think that there's, ways to remove traumatic pain that we carry in our bodies that impacts our soul. So I think that we just have to be better about figuring out what that particular name is for that within our culture. As a way of educating myself more, I am seeking curandera classes because that's something that's important to me. I think that I want to be able to provide these services to people. When I went to Mexico this last time, I was able to find someone who did like a limpia, and she was just like a woman who does them, and everybody knows, and 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., people are lined up to get a limpia. And I thought that was really rad. That's just like her service that she provides to the community, and she does it on a donation basis. And I thought that was really rad. And I was able to find different shops to buy candles and yerbas, and it wasn't a botanica, but wink, wink, kinda. So many individuals, and this is my critique of Catholicism. It's that for a lot of people, it keeps them small, right? In the sense that religion does not allow them to seek interests or knowledge or things that maybe Diosito would not approve of, right? I mean, that's sort of why it took me so long to really look into the gifts that started manifesting very early in life and I just ignored because I was scared. We're all evolving, we're all trying to be better. And that's just one way that I noticed that with this podcast, I could have done better. And in the future, I hope to rectify that and find someone who practices Hinduism and could go a little bit further into discussing chakras, because sometimes we use terms because we think a word doesn't exist or there isn't an expression. And sometimes that's the case, but sometimes we just do it because it's lazy. Speaking of terms, this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is something that I've been thinking about because in Spanish, there is not a term for the word gaslight. At least that I'm familiar with. I've looked online and I haven't been able to find one. So if I ever have a podcast episode, again, in Spanish, and I'm speaking about the term gaslighting, I'm going to start using the phrase, no me operes con gas. No me operes con gas, which literally translates to don't try and operate me with gas. But I think it's applicable to say people are trying to maneuver you in a way that you are not used to. And yeah, if somebody knows something better, please by all means share it. But until then, I'm going to use that. But that's sort of been something that like has been on my mind. I guess it relates because religion sometimes like gaslights us and it makes us feel that the things that are outside of the norm, or, you know, it teaches us that if we like something, it's evil or we're evil, and it uses shame as a tool, right? I don't know. Like, I think shame is, unfortunately, as we can see, it is a motivator, right? Because I think with cancel culture, like shame is kind of that thing. And I have, as of recently, had a lot of thoughts about cancel culture and whether or not I think it's ethical, how I feel about participating in it in the past, how I feel about continuing to participate if that's something I would do or wouldn't do. So yeah, I've just been, I don't know, I've been having thoughts about like cancel culture and how I feel about that. And it's really important to re-examine ourselves in a lot of different ways. And it's interesting because this has just been something on my mind for like a while, even before the full moon. But like as of late, it's just especially on my mind. Things that I've been thinking about, like ways that I could have been better. And then another one that comes to mind, right, is we as like the public allow for certain types of content to come out and be allowed to like do its thing, right? I don't know if any of you saw, but there was something called The Activist that was supposed to be like a competition of sorts, and people were competing for the cause. It was a bunch of body challenges and they were supposed to compete to earn money for the cause that they were being an activist for. And it just felt very gross and cheap and performative, and it was just so fascinating to me. So they finally reacted due to the online presence and being cyberbullied, essentially. They changed it to a documentary instead. And I'm honestly not sure what's happened with that. I just remember that that was something that happened. This is to say that, like, we as the public have the power to make change to things we don't like or things that are not, like, acceptable. And I don't know about you personally, but for me to have a physical challenge show making marginalized and people of color compete for funds is just very dehumanizing. Like, it's just, what kind of dystopian fucking creator like thought of that, you know? That like has been something I've been thinking about, in addition to, you know, I was just in Mexico, and when I was flying back, I was watching something on the little like television. And I was watching a documentary. It's on HBO. It's called Music Box, Woodstock 99, Love, Peace, and Rage. What that sort of made me think about, so many of these young men who went to Woodstock 99, and, you know, Woodstock 99, there was just so much anger and violence in every sort. There were people being sexually assaulted. There were people lighting shit on fire. There were people stealing shit. There were people breaking things down. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I understand why people would be angry at Woodstock 99, because For the 90s, the fact that people could charge $4 for water is just unheard of to me. And it's so wild to hear the people involved with the events who are like, oh, well, you expect to spend money at a festival. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you do. You do expect to spend money at a festival, but $4 for water is fucking highway robbery. I don't care how you spend that. In the 90s, $4 for water? Come on, bro. Come on. I'm going to look up online what the average cost of a fucking water bottle in the 90s, because that's just unheard of to me. So on average, a 20-ounce water bottle cost $1.50. $1.50. Okay, so that's just like you're finding a vending machine, you want a water, $1.50. I would even argue that like vending machine prices are already kind of like steep. So that's like you were in a vending machine and that's what you bought, okay? To even increase that to $3, I'm like, okay, like that seems high, but I need it and I'm gonna drink it, right? But like $4, I don't know, man. That just sounds really gross. Even by today's standard, that sounds really gross. And it's like 23 years later. I got into a whole tangent about like the water bottles, but still, my point being, just the amount of violence that occurred there is just so unheard of. And it's just like those young men, those teenage like boys, they're fathers now. They are fucking youth leaders. They're fucking teachers and principals. And it's just astounding to me, right? And not to say that every man who went to Woodstock 99 was violent and angry and abusive. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that a lot of them were. And it probably would not surprise me if any of those people who did the more heinous things are in a role where they work with the public in some way. Look at BTK, right? Like BTK chilled out his murdering tendencies because he was able to work as an admin, I believe, in a church, and having power over people in that way satisfied his needs. So sometimes people want to seek power in fucked up ways. See Woodstock 99, for example. I watched that. That was the first thing I watched, and I was like, okay, this is pretty heavy. And then the second thing that I watched, because I had 2 flights, so I got to continue it on the next one. The second thing that I watched was I watched a few episodes of American Horror Story Coven. For a lot of people, like, that's the crowd favorite, right? Like, that's the one that's about witches, especially if you are a witchy person, if you consider yourself like a witch or a bruja or whatever. Like, I think a lot of people like that one. And that came out in like 2013. So being able to see it almost 10 years later, and the person I am now and the eyes that I'm seeing it through now are very different. And it's just the general like takeaway that I felt like I had from it was, why do we all as a society accept so much Black trauma related content? And I mean, I feel like it's fucked up that it's taken non-Black people of color and marginalized people to be like fully aware of how often it happens, or at least like notice and say something. Like, obviously we all need to be doing better, but there's just a lot of ways where I feel like, one, the fact that like Papa Legba's storyline is not accurate, I feel like that's really lazy. The fact that the primary focus was New England witches, the white witches, you know, the fact that it was all about like aesthetic things, like all of these things. I just feel like there was a disservice. The history wasn't right. It was a continued portrayal of Black trauma. I don't know. If you remember when Daphne La Hechicera was on, and we had a conversation about how so many people don't get the history right. Like, they almost like rewrite their own history. And I think sometimes that sort of things comes from the fact that people want to feel like the good guy, even if unintentionally, because if I'm uncomfortable watching it and having it play out, I can only imagine what it's like for people with more melanin than me, because that shit is triggering. I think it's important that we realize that we've grown a lot, even if it doesn't feel that way. And sometimes it is difficult to take in things that we used to take in and we used to enjoy. And I think that that's the thing when you're like waking up, when you're waking up and you're becoming more spiritual, you become more aware of other people's feelings and emotions and life situations and just the injustices that have happened. And so it makes you more conscious of what you're taking in. I think that the people who listen to this show are collectively all trying to grow, myself included. Like, I think we're trying to be better. Like, we're not trying to be angry like those people at Woodstock 99. Like, we're trying to be better. We're trying to be happy, or like directed anger, right? So that's what I really enjoy about all of you who listen to this show. I feel like collectively we're trying to grow. We're trying to be better. We want to talk about some creepy stuff, maybe some witchy stuff, maybe some ghost stuff. And we want to try to eliminate harm, and we want to do things right. And I love that. I love that we exist in the world. Wherever in the world we are out here being the ones who break the generational curses. Because I think that that's what we're here to do. We're trying to break these curses. And so remember, we're waking up. We're becoming more aware. We are trying to change our past. And that's okay. As you're more aware of the things you didn't know and the things you weren't aware of when you were in a different time in your life, don't be mean to yourself. Don't be cruel to yourself, because I think it's really easy to be like, oh, why was I so cringe? Why was I so angry? Why was I so violent? And you have to understand that, like, we were just trying to survive, and that's the way we survive. Give yourself some compassion. I'm telling you, this Virgo full moon is so intense, at least for me. It really helps ground me and work through some shit that like I've been needing to, that's sort of been ignored. So for me, this has been very, very helpful. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. And hopefully today's episode was something that was needed. As we grow and as we create and as we just have our impact in the world, we have to remember that, like, as we wake up, as we become the spiritual Bruji people that we are, we're going to change, and that's okay. Change is a necessary part of life, and it's making you the most radical, amazing, witchy person that you can be. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share with somebody that you care about, and please rate the show 5 stars on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening. It really helps people find it. And it seems like y'all have been doing a good job of sharing the show because, again, listeners in Finland and in Australia, I'm just going to try to keep creating content that you enjoy, and hopefully you keep coming back for more. Thanks for being here. Hope to see you soon. Bye.